Boundaries are rules we set to protect our well being. We all need them, but sometimes they are so freaking hard to keep. Today, we review what boundaries are, how to set them, and most importantly, how to keep them. Boundaries. Like I mentioned earlier, we set them to protect ourselves. Even businesses have boundaries, like they have store hours, because they don't want to leave the electricity on all night, or because they want to protect their workers so that someone can sell their things the next day. When I explain boundaries to people, I like to think of them as drawbridges, right? So, bridge, we drop the bridge down, that's the boundary. People can come and visit and we can chat with them. Super cool and wonderful. But if they cross our boundary, they do something unacceptable, we just draw the boundary back up, right? And then we prepare to just say, peace out, right? Someone crosses the boundary, we suddenly never have to interact with them again, right? Yeah, no, okay, fine. I mean, the thing is that oftentimes you have your boundary, they cross the boundary inappropriately, they're mean, they're rude, they steal things from your store or something. You put up the boundary, and then you make an exception. And you're like, wait, no, I know you just made a mistake, and we can totally be friends again. Like, no big deal. I know you didn't really mean to crash my car, or, tell my best good friend that I was a terrible person, or share a deep dark secret that I told you not to tell other people. When we make exceptions after someone has crossed a boundary that we thought we kind of set, we get really frustrated, and sometimes that looks like us lashing out at other people or at ourselves. This could look like yelling at your friends or your family. It could also look like trashing your room up or trashing the living room up. It could even look like going to your room and shutting the door to the world and isolating yourself from pretty much anyone that could hurt you, but also anyone that could help you. We want to avoid those consequences, right? Like, no one likes the next day after we've yelled at a close friend and being like, man, I'm sorry, I was really upset. It's hard to do. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just be like, hey, I'm super upset. I need to yell at some things. We probably shouldn't talk right now. Boundary. Here are 4 steps to setting boundaries. 1. Know where your limits are. 2. Be clear and assertive with the boundary. 3. Practice, practice, practice. And not just like any practice, like practice well. I once heard someone said, practice makes perfect, and then they corrected it as practice makes permanent. So let's make sure when we're practicing setting boundaries, we can set things that are realistic and that we can hold. Which brings us to step 4, be prepared to follow through with the consequences. Limits change throughout life. Like, for example, when we were all little babies, most of us could probably entwine ourselves into little balls and somehow our legs could touch the top of our heads. Yet now I can not really get into a downward dog. It's not that pretty yogi downward dog. Completely acceptable. I know. We just get to where we are and you can still get all sorts of goodness from yoga. But it's definitely a limitation. New to me. Sort of. It's been that way for years. Anyway, sometimes it can be really hard to figure out where your limits are. For example, if you take up jogging for funsies, we know you probably won't be able to jog a mile in 4 minutes, but you might be able to do one in 12 or 15 or 28. We just don't know. So you'd have to actually go out there for a nice stroll, nice quick paced jog, to figure out where your limits are. Say you're working through college or something and you want to take some more classes, but also your boss is asking if you can take on another shift at work. If you're doing well in your classes now, you might be able to take on another shift at work. but you might not. You might have to test it and let them know, like, hey, yeah, let me try a couple weeks of taking on an extra shift, and if it doesn't work, I'll let you know. So if you already know your limits, yay! But if you don't, you might have to test and figure out where they are. And as you're testing, checking in with yourself is going to be super essential. So let me go back to that jogging example. When you were trying to figure out where your limit was jogging, you might notice that as you approached the limit of what you could physically do, you might start to breathe really heavy, some like gasping. You might feel like I really might have asthma. You may also start to feel your legs burn, like the kind when you know that when you have to go to the bathroom, it's gonna be tough to squat down and you're not gonna wanna get back up. You might also notice having an increase of negative thoughts, like, I am never going to make it around another lap again. In the other example, where your boss asked if you could take on another shift and you're testing your workload capacity, you might notice that when you're approaching your limit, you might start making some mistakes at work or in your classes. Your grades might start to fall. You could start losing sleep. You might sleep too much. Your friends might notice that you're not hanging out with them or that you're not texting them back much. You could get snippy with your roomies, whether that's your parents, your lover, your cats, or dogs. You might even experience more negative self-talk or see an increase in your drinking or drug use. Checking in and noticing these changes will be key to identifying where your limits are. If you're having trouble identifying where your limits are, let me know in the comments. Some boundaries are easier to say and share than others. For example, I can't work more than 3 nights a week. What about more difficult boundaries? Like, your drinking has gone too far. If you keep drinking, something is gonna happen, I don't know what. A better way to share that more difficult boundary might be, your drinking has gone too far. If you keep drinking, I'm gonna have to move out. Note: setting a boundary is not an excuse to threaten someone. For example, if you poop with the door open again, I will throw your things out. That is not a boundary. That's just a violent threat. If you poop with the door open again,
Poopy.
we are gonna have to think about moving into a house with 2 bathrooms. If sharing a boundary verbally in real time seems like it might be too much and too difficult to do, you can write it down. You can shoot them a text, you can shoot them an email. I mean, you could even write it down on a piece of paper and show it to them. Boundaries can also be difficult to formulate. Often an if-then statement works, especially if the boundary is something that is pretty serious. But depending on who you're talking to, you might not even have to set a consequence. For example, I haven't been getting enough sleep lately. I've got to get to bed earlier, so I'm gonna be heading in at 9, okay? If you have a super awesome human in your life, they might even remind you of your new bedtime routine. If you have someone that maybe doesn't take this too well, you might have to restate the boundary with a consequence next time. Like, remember I mentioned I was not getting enough sleep lately? I'm gonna head to bed at 9, and if you keep trying to have a conversation with me at that point, I will have to go to the bedroom and lock the door. If you need help setting a boundary, let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. Practice! Say you want to set a pretty serious boundary. Like, if you keep talking about my weight, I'm gonna hang up or leave the room. Or if you keep checking my phone without my permission, we are gonna break up. If those boundaries are too big for you to share, start somewhere else. For example, it might be a boundary with yourself. Like, I need to limit my phone time before bed. Hey phone, if you keep seducing me with your screen lighting up with all those fancy notifications, I'm gonna have to turn you off. Or use that little moon nighttime thing so you don't get me to pick you up. After you successfully set a boundary with your phone, Maybe you can try setting a boundary around your time. Like, I need more me time. I'm going to spend every week with a friend for at least an hour outside the house. If you're still struggling with boundaries, maybe you can ask a friend to help you stay accountable and to keep pushing you to share your boundaries with the people that you really need to share your boundaries with. That brings us to step 4. The tricky part about consequences is that you have to be ready to follow through with the ones you set. If you think the consequence is too great, then you've got to set a different one. Like if you set a boundary, like if you keep drinking, I'm going to move out, but you don't really want to move out, you might have to change that boundary too. If you keep drinking, you have to move out if you're ready for something like that. If you keep drinking, I'm going to spend more time out of the house and with my friends. Boundaries can be super tricky. Let me know in the comments if you need any help setting up some boundaries in your life. Thank you for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you're curious to learn more. If this content adds value to your life, click the bell to get a notification whenever I upload new videos. Until next time, live intentionally, love fiercely, and lead courageously.